I'm LaVern Vivio from the Blaze TV, and this is Wide Awake. Now, you may be wondering why I'm sitting in front of Studio 33 with an empty box. But I promise you, it's going to make sense in just a moment, because if you were with us during our museum tour a couple of weeks ago, you might recognize this spot. This is where the tour began. You would exit the doors from Studio 33 from the D-Day exhibit, and you would begin the tour right here. And it's because of what was sitting in this very first position that every time I walk through this space in the studio now, I can't help but think about a story that my preacher Steve Flatt shared with us about 25 years ago in our congregation. He and some people I go to church with had gone into Romania to distribute Bibles right after the Bible ban had been lifted. And the people were so desperate to get a Bible in their hands, they went in with thousands of copies. But when people realized what they had to give away, they were mobbed. The crowds were incredible. And they ran out of Bibles very quickly and were left with just a bunch of empty boxes. Well, as soon as the crowd knew that the Bibles were gone, the crowd, of course, slowly dispersed, but there was one old man that remained. He had not been in time to get a copy of the Bible, but he finally walked up to him and he asked, he said, "Can I just have the empty box that the Bibles came in?" And I have to tell you, when I first heard that story all those years ago, I thought it was a sweet, very moving story, but I didn't really get it because this was just a book full of stories to me then. I didn't know its story. And it's a story you probably know bits and pieces of, like the fact that it is the best-selling book of all times. It's the most published book of all times. But did you also know that it is the most translated book of all times? 1,300 dialects and languages and still counting. Did you know it is the most banned and the most burned book of all times? And it's still a book that, if found in your possession in some parts of the world, can cost you your life. It was written by over 40 people from all different walks of life on 3 separate continents in 3 different languages, in all sorts of places, in caves and palaces and prisons, and over a course of 1,600 years. But it had one central theme: the Messiah. It was so highly regarded that the scribes, when they would copy these different writings, they didn't copy them word for word, they copied them letter by letter. They would set up 5 chapters at a time, and they'd make sure they had the exact number of columns, the exact number of lines, and then they'd go letter by letter. They'd complete 5 chapters, and they would know the exact letter in the center of what they had just written, and they would count to the very center. And if that didn't match the letter that they knew from what they had just copied, they didn't edit it and fix it, they threw it away and they started all over. They did such an amazing job that when they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls just after the end of World War II, and they compared the writings that they found from the prophet Isaiah with the oldest writings that they had to that date, there was a 1,100-year difference between the two, and they wanted to see how much had changed. Only 17 letters had changed. And on closer examination, they realized that the letters had changed were primarily in the spelling of names as they were translated from the Aramaic and Hebrew into the common language. This is the tale of 2 promises, or 2 agreements, covenants, testaments. It's all the same word. The Old Promise, Covenant, Testament with the Jewish people and God as to how they were going to live their life. The first set of books were the books of instruction. The second set, the books of the prophets, and the third set of the writings. Together, they made the Old Covenant, the Old Testament. And then along comes Christ, and you have the whole New Testament. The first set of books, the first grouping of writings, referred to as the Gospels. They were the account of Christ's life. And then you have a book that gives you an account of what happened with the apostles, the acts that the apostles did right after Christ was crucified. And then you have the letters that were written by the apostles to the early Christians and early churches to guide them and instruct them and encourage them. And then, of course, that final revelation from John written while he was in prison. These books, you remember back in the day, didn't come in this nice, neat little bound copy. They were separate scrolls, each and every one of them. All these books together, the Old and the New Promise, the Old and the New Testament, were so highly regarded that one early church leader referred to them as the Divine Library, but most people just referred to them as the books, or the Biblia, eventually known as the Bible that we know. When you know the story, it changes your perception of it. That's why when I walk through this space, I can't help but think about that empty box and that old man in Romania, because I think about what this space held, a collection of Bibles that was beyond anything I've ever had the privilege to see and actually get to touch. The story changes your perception. That's what we do here at the Blaze. We tell stories. That's what Studio 33 is being refitted for right now, to tell stories, because here at the Blaze, we tell stories of love and courage where the good guys win. Could there be a better example of that? The greatest story ever told. God bless, and Los Dio, y'all.